All right, boys and girls, I'm going to talk about reducing some algebraic expressions today. Some algebraic fractions, or sometimes called rational expressions. So look, what you got to do when you're reducing is you're actually dividing each numerator and denominator. You're dividing both by the greatest common factor. But the thing that's confusing is you see you got like three different parts, because we've got the numbers that we know what they are, 16 and 6, you know, the natural numbers, and then we have, well, these unknowns, x squared and x, and then we also have y and y. So normally I don't just like split it up like that, but sometimes that kind of helps. Like this is how I see it. I see this problem like that. I don't normally write it, but that's what I see. So let's take a look at each one. Now 16 and 6. The greatest common factor of 16 and 6 turns out to be 2. So what we end up doing then is we end up dividing 16 by 2 and 6 by 2. Do you see what I mean? So 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, there's nothing bigger that goes into 8 and 3. There's nothing else that goes into 8 and 3 other than 1. These things are called relative primes. Sometimes they're also called coprimes, but 8 and 3 are relative primes, and that's how you know when you're reduced completely. There's nothing else you can take out. Now, x squared and x, well, the GCF of x squared and x is, well, it's x, because x squared, well, let's do that over here. X squared is x times x, and x is, of course, just x. So now we're dividing them. You see it's x squared divided by x, so it's kind of like this. Do you see? That's divided into itself one time. You're just left with x. So this is x right there. Do you see? You see how we got all that? And now the GCF of y and y is just, well, that's just y. Do you see? And so we can divide that by itself, and that's just times 1, right? So, now, the thing that's tricky about this is that's over 1, and this multiplication sign looks kind of like that variable, but what we have is 8 times x divided by 3. Now, how do you check? How can you tell if this is right? So the first thing you want to do is you've got to make sure that the numerator and the denominator, they are relatively prime. They're coprime, that they don't share any common factors. Well, on your homework for today, if you're doing this with me anyway, I'm having you check your answer by go ahead and multiply by something so that you get that denominator back. Because if you can multiply this denominator by something to get that back, and the numerators match, then you're good. So this is actually also a tie-in for what's going to come tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to be adding and subtracting these things, and you have to get a common denominator. So we have to figure out 3 times what equals 6xy. So 3 times what is equal to that? That's actually the lowest common multiple. Turns out it's going to be 2xy. Because 3 times 2 is 6, yes? And then, of course, xy. Now, if I multiply the bottom by that, I also have to multiply the top by the same thing, because this whole thing right here, this whole thing just equals 1. And when you multiply by 1, of course, the value itself doesn't change. So let's go ahead and multiply these two together. 8 times 2 is 16. That's what I want. X times x is x squared. That's good, and that's just y. So now, if this was our original problem, it is, then we're right. So what we've actually said, here's what we're saying. We're saying that this algebraic fraction, this rational expression right there, is the same as this one. These two things right here, they are exactly the same. We reduced it. We reduced this by dividing out the greatest common factor of each of those terms, each of those expressions, and that's what we ended up with. These two things are exactly the same. It's kind of like the difference between having a $10 bill versus a $5 bill and 5 $1 bills. Same amount, same value, but looks different. Smaller, same value. All right, so anyway, I hope this helped. This is how you do your homework. That's this one right here. And, well, if you're having trouble, you got to come see me. Anyway, if you're just watching on YouTube, you're not one of my students, I hope this was helpful anyway. And like I said, tomorrow what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing something like, well, something like this. So let's say we had 1 over x plus 2 over y. Do you see? In order to add those two things together, we have to find the lowest common multiple of x and y. Now, I don't know what x is, I don't know what y is. I have to assume that they're relatively prime, and that means their LCM is their product, so it's xy. And the way I get xy from just x by multiplying is I have to multiply by y over y. Do you see? So this is y, and then plus goes there, right? Because it's y plus, and then this one I have to multiply by x over x, so that's 2x. That's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Anyway, hope it was helpful. If it was, you can click like and maybe share it with some people.